Right now, somewhere out there, someone is waiting for a text back and calling it chemistry. Someone is chasing a person who never once reached for them and is calling it a slow burn. Someone sitting across from a first date feeling nothing and talking themselves into giving it more time because isn't that what you're supposed to do? And someone else is meeting the wrong person, feeling every butterfly their body can produce and mistaking the turbulence for the real thing. These are not rare situations. They're happening every single day to smart, self-aware people who just never got handed the right information. We're swimming in misinformation about attraction, and it's not because people are stupid, it's because the myths are so seductive. They feel like hope. They feel like permission to keep going when maybe the most loving thing that you can do for yourself is to stop. And today I'm going to dismantle every single one of them, 7 lies about attraction that almost everyone believes, so you stop making decisions based on a story and start reading the actual signs that your body and the other person are sending. Stay with me because if you get this right, it changes everything. Not just the person that you choose next, but the way that you read every situation you've been confused about for years. Okay, before we get into the lies, here's something that you need to understand about how attraction actually works. Attraction's not a feeling that you choose. It's a biological and neurological response that your brain runs on a combination of inputs, evolutionary data, emotional history, nervous system signals, and environmental cues. Psychologist Robert Cialdini, neuroscientist Helen Fisher, and researchers across decades of relationship science, they all point to the same thing. Attraction is a system, and like any system, it can be misread, hijacked, confused. The problem is we were never taught how it actually operates. We were handed pop songs and rom-coms and told this is the roadmap. It isn't, which is exactly how 7 very convincing lies got into your head and stayed there. Let's take them apart one by one. Lie 1, opposites attract. This is the most romantic lie on the list and the most thoroughly disproven one. What the research actually shows is the opposite of opposites. Psychologists call it the similarity attraction effect. Study after study, including landmark work done by Don Byrne, going back decades, shows that people are consistently more attracted to those who share their values, worldview, communication style, and lifestyle goals. Not identical twins, but similar enough that their version of the world overlaps with yours. Here's why that myth of opposites survives. Novelty is stimulating. Someone different from you is interesting at first. Different music, different energy, a different way of seeing things. That novelty gets mistaken for deep attraction, but novelty wears off. And what's underneath it? The misaligned values, the clashing communication styles, the fundamentally different visions for life, that stays. Opposites don't attract. Opposites intrigue briefly, then they exhaust. Lie 2. Chemistry means compatibility. This one sends people into years of the wrong relationships. Chemistry, that electric, charged, can't stop thinking about them feeling, that's real. But here's what it actually is. It's a cocktail of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin disruption. It's your brain in a state of novelty and uncertainty, and your brain can't tell the difference between excitement and anxiety. They feel almost identical on the inside. Neuroscientist Lucy Brown, who scanned brains in the early stages of attraction, she's shown that romantic love activates the same reward circuitry as cocaine. That high is not a personality assessment. It's a chemical state. You can have explosive chemistry with someone who is completely wrong for you. You can have simmering, steady chemistry with someone who is completely right for you and not recognize it because it doesn't hit like a drug. So think of chemistry like data. It's not a verdict. Stop letting it be the whole case. Lie 3. If they like you, they'll chase you. This one has caused more unnecessary games, more strategic silences, and more deliberate unavailability than almost any other belief in the dating world. The truth is that confident, secure, emotionally healthy adults do not always chase. They pursue where there's reciprocal encouragement. When the signs are confusing, they back off, not because they aren't interested, but because they respect their own time and energy. The people who chase relentlessly, regardless of mixed signals, are often not the people that you want. Anxious attachment styles chase. People with poor emotional boundaries chase. The ones who won't stop pushing past your silence is not always romantic. Sometimes they just can't read a room. The real question is not whether someone's chasing you, it's whether someone is consistently, clearly showing up with effort, with follow through, and with presence, because that is what interest looks like in a grounded adult. So stop waiting to be chased and start looking for someone who just shows up consistently. Lie 4, attraction should be instant. Pop culture did this one to us. It's that slow motion moment across the room, the eyes meeting through a crowd, the immediate, undeniable knowing. And yes, it does happen, but it's one version of attraction attraction, and it's not the most reliable one. Some of the strongest, most lasting attraction builds over time. Psychologists call this the propinquity effect. Repeated exposure to someone, familiarity, shared experience, and growing trust. These aren't consolation prizes for failing to feel that lightning bolt. They are the ingredients of a different and often deeper kind of connection. Helen Fisher's research on attachment shows that what the brain does in long-term love is entirely different from early infatuation, and it's more stable, more sustaining, and more satisfying over time. You are allowed to feel uncertain on a first date, and a second, and a third. You're not required to know immediately, so give the slower burn the respect it deserves before you write it off for not arriving like a thunderstorm. Lie 5. Butterflies mean love. Here's a reframe that might genuinely change your life. Butterflies, that fluttery, off-balanced, unsettled feeling in your stomach, that is a stress response. Your body is producing cortisol and adrenaline. Your nervous system is in a mild state of threat activation. Sometimes that threat's exciting, but sometimes, and this is the part that no one talks about, it means that you're in the presence of someone who's unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, or simply unfamiliar in the way that your nervous system hasn't resolved yet. The butterflies that you feel around someone who's a little cold, a little distant, a little hard to read, that's your anxious attachment system firing up. That is the biochemistry of uncertainty. And it's not the same as that warm, settled, open feeling you get in the presence of someone who's genuinely safe and genuinely interested. Think of it this way. Turbulence on a plane doesn't mean that the destination is exciting. It just means that the ride is rough. Love that lasts, it doesn't always flutter. Sometimes it just breathes. So pay attention to whether the butterflies come with calm or whether they come with a low-level hum of worry that you keep explaining away. Lie number 6, texting reveals chemistry. We have convinced ourselves that the way someone texts us tells us everything we need to know. The response time, the emoji usage, whether they asked a question back, whether the message felt warm or flat. And yes, communication patterns are meaningful, but texting strips out 90% of the data that you actually use to read a person. Their tone of voice, the look in their eyes, whether they lean in when they talk to you, whether the conversation has a rhythm or a gap. Texting compresses a full human being into a few lines of text, and we interpret those lines through the filter of everything that we already feel and fear. Fast texting doesn't mean deep interest. Slow texting doesn't mean low interest. Short messages can come from someone who is extraordinary in person and just doesn't live on their phone. Long messages can come from someone who is performing connection that they don't actually feel, and they're using texting to make a plan. Use presence to read a person. A conversation in a room tells you more in 10 minutes than a month of messages. Lie 7. Mixed signals mean fear of feelings. This is the one that people cling to the longest and the hardest. Someone blows hot and cold. They're interested and then they're distant. They say the right things and then they go quiet for days. And instead of reading that pattern for what it is, inconsistency, we tell ourselves a story. They're scared. They have walls up. They've been hurt before. They just need more time. Maybe, but here's the harder truth. In most cases, mixed signals are not fear, they're ambivalence. Ambivalence means that they're weighing up whether you're worth the effort against everything else competing for their energy. It means that you're an option, not a priority, and no amount of patience, no amount of being more available, no amount of understanding their process will move you from option to priority if you were never there to begin with. Genuine interest, even in someone who's cautious or introverted, it's consistent. It might be slow, it might be quiet, but it's consistent. Mixed signals are the signal, so read them. Here's what all 7 of these lies have in common. They shift the power away from you. They ask you to override what you're actually experiencing. So the uncertainty, the one-sidedness, the exhaustion of sustaining something that isn't quite sustaining itself, and replace it with a better feeling explanation. And the better feeling explanation is what keeps you stuck. It's not because hope is bad, but because hope aimed at the wrong person is one of the most expensive things that you can spend yourself on. Every month you invest in someone who is ambivalent about you. Every month you invest in someone who's ambivalent about you is a month that you didn't spend being available for someone who would have been certain. Real attraction, mutual, grounded, building attraction. It doesn't ask you to make many excuses for it. It doesn't ask you to constantly translate it. It doesn't leave you lying awake trying to decode what was meant by one sentence in a conversation 3 days ago. It doesn't make you feel like you're doing all the heavy lifting while the other person just happens to be present. It feels like evidence. Consistent, mutual, effortless evidence. And you will recognize it, not because it feels like the movies, but because it feels like relief. So here's what I want you to do after this. Think about the person you've been telling yourself a story about. Run them through these 7 lies. Not to be harsh, not to shut down hope, but to see clearly. Because the version of you that stops making excuses for the wrong people creates space, actual real space for the right one to land. You cannot fill a full cup. Stop filling yours with the wrong things. Stop chasing chemistry without compatibility. Stop mistaking butterflies for love when what you're really feeling is anxiety with a better marketing strategy. Stop reading texts like they're windows into somebody's soul when they're barely a keyhole. Stop excusing inconsistency as depth. Stop romanticizing the chase when what you actually need is someone who never makes you question whether they're in. You deserve someone whose actions require zero translation. Someone who makes a decision to show up and then keeps making it. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the greatest gift that you can give the people you love is the courage to see clearly, stop settling silently, and choose someone who chooses them back, boldly, brilliantly, and without blinking.